Hello, my friends. Jessie here. Welcome to our homestead in the middle of the Ozark Mountains. I am so grateful for you. I think you're going to enjoy today's episode. It is all about shelf styling. As far as DIYs go, we will be making some Geode nightlights and other nature-inspired crafts. On top of that, I am recreating art that would normally cost in the thousands of dollars for less than 30. Before we slide into this episode, let's take a brief look back at where the shelves we will be styling today began. My style is continually evolving, and though there was absolutely nothing wrong with these built-ins, as of late, every time I walked past them and peered in their direction, I felt nothing but resentment. Resentment towards them for clashing with my ever-evolving taste, and resentment towards myself for choosing this style in the first place when we built the house. Finally coming to the conclusion that my negative emotions towards these shelves would not make them any better. Piece by piece, I began to take them apart and build them in a way that more so struck my fancy. I've got to admit, there were moments in this process that I thought to myself, what in the world have I got us into? But with the continual utterance of the phrase, trust the process, I decided to keep trekking forward. And with that said, 1 week, 3 days, a handful of splinters, and a house covered in sawdust, the project was done. With all that wrapped up, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing better than waking up to a clean house with a major project complete is waking up to a clean house with a major project complete on a Saturday morning with thunderstorms abound. And that, my friends, brings us to where we are today. The first step in every shelf styling project that I tackle is grouping like items together. Likeness can be based on type, color, or even visual weight. Normally, whatever draws your eye in first is the heaviest visually. As far as colors go, as a rule of thumb, the darker the item, the heavier it is to the eye. After all the pieces have been divided accordingly, the grouping with the largest items are tackled first. In my case, my plants are the first thing your eyes are drawn to, so that is where I began. So as you can see, I space them out, balancing one another in an aesthetically pleasing way, at least to my eye. The objective is when they're all set in their places that the eye effortlessly bounces from one piece to the other. A big objective is to make sure that the eye isn't heavily drawn to one area more so than the other. And as you can see, I've moved to the next weightiest objects and onto books. I normally weave books in and out of the process because they are usually stacked or joined in with other objects. Speaking of books, they're a really great way to tell a story and give guests an insight to the people who live inside that home. The way a person chooses to adorn their bookcases or homes for that matter is very personal to them. One person's giving their pieces room to breathe, maybe another person's barren. Fact of the matter is, there is no one right way when it comes to design. That being said, there are a few simple guidelines that can help you along the way if you happen to find yourself stuck in the process. For instance, adding depth and interest is a great way to make sure your shelves are aesthetically pleasing. This can be accomplished by both layering and stacking your items. Personally, I like to group my pieces together and create little vignettes all over the shelves. I like to make sure my groupings are interesting by adding different textures, colors, and heights. Remembering this can be helpful when arranging and grouping pieces together and will ultimately ensure that we have a more visually pleasing aesthetic. On top of that, pairing things together creates a more intentional look as opposed to pieces spread haphazardly across the unit. When it comes to deciding what pieces go where, I like to think of it in terms of a Christmas tree. In an effort to ensure our Christmas trees don't appear top heavy, we make sure that the largest pieces are at the bottom. This is true for our shelving units as well. No matter what I'm decorating, I always want to make sure I take moments to view whatever it is that I have done thus far from a wider angle. Being too close for too long can create a stuck in the weeds type of feeling, and sometimes a break from that position is all that's needed. All design tricks and tips aside, the fact of the matter is that it's your shelf and you are the one living with it. The point is not to replicate somebody else's style, but to create your own. Instead of our home speaking to another's likings, they should tell the tales of our unique and individual stories. As you can see here, we've moved to the kitchen and I am using the exact same strategy. In case you're wondering why absolutely everything was put away and off the shelves, it's because we did an entire deep clean after we did our project. I had washed every single dish and stashed it away until it was completely finished. And as you can see here, I am just utilizing the same steps I did before in the living room. I won't show you the final result, as I'm sure you've seen my kitchen many a times. For as long as I can remember, I have so coveted a piece of art painted on raw canvas. If I had one, I'd hang it just as it is. I just love the real raw look of it. I've got a few artists that are just my absolute favorites, Chelsea Fly being one of them. Maybe one day I'll bite the bullet and purchase one, but $4,000 just doesn't seem quite justifiable for something I'm going to hang on the wall. So for the longest time, I've had this idea of printing one of the PDFs that I've purchased on a piece of canvas or cloth, and I finally come around to do just that. I decided to print it on a piece of linen cotton blend fabric. I wanted the texture of it, and it turned out exactly like I had pictured in my mind. The next step was deciding whether or not I wanted to paint texture on it, so I took a piece of the extra fabric that surrounded it and tested whether or not I liked the look of it. It was really hard to see on the unprinted fabric, but I decided to throw caution to the wind and just go for it. For those of y'all who've been around, you've seen me do this on my prints. I'm basically just taking matte Mod Podge and painting on the canvas. It's really important that you try to mimic the artist's brushstrokes to make it look more authentic. This is one of my favorite processes to do. It's just so relaxing. I like to just put on a good podcast and have at it. Okay, as we are finishing up and waiting for the Mod Podge to dry, let's move on to our second DIY project. I'm going to link these in the description box. They're both purchased from Amazon, but I've got some geode slices and a nightlight plug-in. This is something I've made before, as you can see, but I've been wanting some more and I thought I'd share it with y'all. I like this particular plug-in nightlight because it is light censored and only turns on when it is dark inside the room. They come in a package of 6 and they are very affordable. As far as the geode slices go, they come in all different types of colors, so that's totally up to your discretion. This project is extremely straightforward. I decided to use E6000. You can use any other type of glue. I just happen to know that this very much works. I've had the previous one I've made for well over a year and it is holding up perfectly. This project is extremely straightforward. Basically, you're going to take your nightlight, put the glue on the face of it, and stick the geode on top. Next, lay the nightlight geode side down and wait for it to dry. When the light shines through them, they put off such a pretty glow. Each color is different. The amber colored one is such a warm ambiance. Anything that makes the house more cozy and homier, for lack of a better word, I am all about. They're also a really great gift. A couple years ago, Lola was asking for a nightlight and she has this obsession with rocks and geodes, and it became the perfect stocking stuffer. So I love adding anything organically shaped as far as decor items go. The fact that it's derived from nature makes it all the more appealing. When I came across these rocks that had drilled holes in them, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Taking the leather string I already had in my craft stash, I decided to string the stones and make a decorative strand. Cutting the leather to the appropriate length, I tied a knot and began stringing. To add a bit of visual interest, I decided to create a knot between each stone. This also ultimately made the piece longer in the end. This, yet again, by no mistake, is a relaxing and repetitive process. Once again, cranking up my favorite commentators, I followed along. After stranding the final rock and tying my last knot, I created a loop for hanging. Where it can be hung or displayed is only limited by your imagination. Speaking of imagination, let's take a peek back at my DIY canvas art. So I am super excited about the way this turned out. It's such a prime example of how a little effort can make a massive impact, and that impact doesn't have to cost you a fortune. Conversely, sometimes in order to get to wherever your goals are taking you, it takes a lot of application. That of course brings us to the final reveal and conclusion to our bookcase transformation. so appreciative and thankful to have y'all join us for this transformation. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts, maybe things you would have changed, done differently. I'd love to hear of any DIY projects you may be doing or any suggestions you may have for future content. I'm always happy to answer any questions you may have to the best of my ability, so feel free to leave any below. Until next time, friends, see you soon.